Hey, deserving listeners, Love is Blind Season 3 interviews after the season ended, Season 3. Let's watch. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. Keep in mind that everything I say is completely speculative based on extremely limited information. Let's watch.
In that moment, I think there was so much going on that I didn't catch it until I watched it for the first time. Oh, thank you.
And what do you think his motivations were for telling his family that so straight off the bat?
I want to believe that he was truly processing this information and needed his family to just get it.
Yeah, so I don't know if you caught that, but this is further on in the interview, and they're talking about when she was at his family dinner situation, and it seemed as though Batistes brought up a pretty sensitive topic about their differences, Nancy and Batistes, about abortion. So Anthony Gilét is asking Nancy, why do you think he brought that up? Because it was pretty awkward, kind of out of the blue. And so Nancy's saying, well, I want to believe that he truly was trying to process this difference and he was thinking about it in a authentic and genuine way. But I think she's also going to say, but I wonder if this was his way of trying to gather reasons to justify him not wanting to be with me.
I don't know if he had already, because there was a couple of days between the day that we had the conversation and the day that we met his family. So there was time in between. I don't know if after the first time we talked about it, if he called his family and had already talked to them about it, or if he was just had other things going on that he didn't think about saying anything until they were in front of us. I know that he hadn't seen his family for a really.
So, by the way, it's not me that's freezing, it's their feed. They're on a video chat situation, so their connection does this every once. So I haven't been including every time that it does this.
Long here, I want you to be a part of this, but also like there's all this stuff. And by the way, Nancy believes this. Like, I don't know if it was just word vomit, but it was disrespectful. I don't think that he should have thrown me under the bus.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think necessarily he had like already spoke to his family about it beforehand. But I do question whether there was a bit of an ulterior motive there to speak to the family, because he obviously knows what his family believes. Like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Nancy has a lot of opportunity to throw Batistes under the bus now. The things that she's criticizing him about, I think, are pretty minor in terms of what she could potentially criticize him about. So it's interesting. I don't know if she's just a very nice person. I think that's probable. Or if she's being thoughtful about not participating in internet gossip and attacking each other. Like she doesn't want to get in some he said, she said with Batistes. I don't know. But Anthony is, I think, laying out the questions of like, well, do you ulterior motive? Like, what do you think something's going on there? And Nancy isn't really taking the bait on that.
But I do question whether there was a bit of an ulterior motive there to speak to the family, because he obviously knows what his family believes. Like, that's who has brought him up. So he knows that. So whether it was just more a case of like, oh, okay, well, if my family know this and they rally against Nancy, is that more of me? Is that just giving me backup if I don't want to go through with it?
Exactly.
Okay, so Nancy wasn't going to say it, but she, I think, is willing to agree. She's like, I think right now in her head, she's like, well, I didn't say it, you did. I'll just say exactly in a very calm, subdued way because... But yes, I think she's saying, yes, I do believe that it's possible, probable, that Batistes was out of the relationship and was deceiving me and was looking for a reason to get out. And so he, in the middle of dinner with his family, decided to bring up this topic of abortion and this very narrow band of disagreement. Because my perception, the way they frame it in terms of that conversation was that they disagreed. But to me, they agreed on 99.9% of the probable outcomes of pregnancy, of conception. And there was this very rare instance where they were disagreeing about, and maybe a few different instances they were disagreeing about. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't remember it precisely. I was actually thinking, and don't hold me to this, but I was actually thinking about going back and watching this whole season over again and just reacting to the kind of key conversations, knowing everything that we know, not only from the show, but also from the interviews. Partially just because I'm curious, knowing what we know now. And also, I'm going to tell you, I was telling my wife this earlier, that season 3 Love is Blind, I think is potentially the best reality TV show I've ever watched. I haven't watched a lot of reality TV, but I've watched a lot in the past 2 or 3 years. And there's probably there's some shining moments in other reality TV, but I find that this season has the most for me to get into. Whenever I watch these shows as a therapist, as a professor, as a professional, as a professor, and as a trainer and supervisor and thinker about this sort of stuff, I am looking for something that will prompt me to say something about the stuff that I know about so that I can yammer about that and y'all can either benefit from it or disagree with it or something. When I watch other shows like Too Hot to Handle or what was that other show, Love Island, I'm watching it and I'm just like, there's nothing for me to say. It's just all stuff that I'm sure people are into, but it's not compelling to me. What's compelling to me, I think I'm learning, is when real needs and real meaning and real life is happening. Real stakes, I guess, is the word for it. Like Too Hot to Handle, Love Island, it feels like there's no stakes because the individuals don't seem like they really care as to whether or not they are with someone on the show. And why would they? They barely know these people. For Love is Blind, they legit, because of the way they engineer the show, I think they legit fall in love with these people. It's like an intense relationship. And the friendships you develop with each other. The first season of Love is Blind, we saw the Amber and Jessica fight, right? And at the time, I remember thinking, oh, I guess they really bonded. But as each season goes on, it really becomes clear that because they spend so much time together outside of the pods, you could argue that they become better friends with the friends than they do fall in love or get to know the people in the pods, the dating people, because the dating people, they don't see in 3 dimensions. They don't hang out with these other people they're socializing with. So, they really bond. And I talked about this before, but if you've ever been to camp as a kid or even as an adult, and it could just be for 3 days, 2 nights and 3 days, and by the end of that 3rd day, you are like best friends with like 13 other people because of the way we are as humans. And it really just points to just how isolated we are, how rare that is, where we actually get to know people 24/7, how we just are just so separated from other human beings. It's such a rare thing, and how much we crave it because we really fall into that situation. But anyway, so my point is that I find that Love is Blind, 90 Day Fiancé, these other shows where there's real stakes and real bonding, real relationships, then it gives me stuff to talk about, and it's just more interesting to me, like way more interesting. And I think that season 3 Love is Blind, I don't know what it is about the characters, the way they edited it or something. I just find that there's so much to talk about, so much to think about, so much to jump off from, and so much to care about. I think that they edited it in such a way that I care about all of them. I think all of them, the one couple that I feel like they didn't show a lot of because they lacked drama was Alexa and Brennan. We just didn't get to know them very well. They seem like very sweet, likable people for sure, but there wasn't much for us to bond with. Whereas the rest of them, I feel like there's a lot to get to know them and get to know their vulnerabilities, their needs, their personalities, and I find that to be compelling TV. Do you? I do. But anyway, so I was thinking about going back and watching, and so maybe I'll watch I'm not going to watch the whole season and react to it, but just maybe every episode there's 2 or 3 scenes that I'll rewatch and react to. Don't hold me to it, but I have that aspiration.
Was there anything like on the show where you were like, why did they have to show that?
Can we talk about 2 things? Okay.
Yeah.
First things first, let me tell you, we're in the bathtub, right? And at this point, this is our first day together, our first night,
Yeah, so they're going to tell you about the plunger moment, the fart moment or something. At the time, I interpreted it as that Nancy comes from a friend group and a family where that kind of talk is completely fine. And I remember talking about this at the time when I saw it. I was like, there's two types of people, essentially. You have people that are totally fine with talking about butt stuff and fart stuff and plunger stuff and poop stuff. And, and not only is that fine, but they'll also kind of get a kick out of it, right? It's kind of fun to push the envelope, if you will, and so to speak, and to also get a laugh because, there's nothing funnier than farts. And so I'm in that camp, and everyone in my family's in that camp. Other people are not in that camp, and thus are utterly disgusted when you bring that stuff up. So you have to make sure that everyone's on board with that kind of talk. So I interpreted it as she comes from a family where all that is totally fine and not considered off limits, and that for Batistes, he either was thinking, well, the cameras are here, or he comes from a family where they didn't talk about that. So let's see what she says.
A little bit monokini on, I'm trying to set the mood for my fiance. But then we're in this tub and I realized that I don't know how to spell this man's name or his last name. I didn't know what his job was. There were certain questions I didn't want to ask in the pods. I took this experiment so seriously, and I'll tell you what, I did not want to know his job when we were in the pods. I did not want to know his race. I didn't.
That's interesting. Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think that's in the direction of what they're encouraged to do, right? If we remember Shake, he seemed to be trying to work around those rules by asking questions like, could I pick you up at a concert, that kind of stuff, or how much do you work out? And so Nancy was in the other direction. Makes sense.
I want to know how tall he was. I didn't want to know any of the traits that I would usually know in the real world. I truly wanted to see, could I fall in love with just the personality, right? And so when we were in the bathtub, I was asking all these questions. I was like, oh, so you're a CPA? Did you go to school? Just kind of getting all the career and stuff like that. And then I, being a handy woman and knowing how to fix shit at home, I was we were talking about that topic, and I was sharing some stuff about fixing houses and whatnot. And then it led to the conversation of getting creative with tools and whatnot. So
okay, well, that makes a lot more sense. And it sounds like they edited it in a way to make it seem like she just brings up plungers and poop being stuck in toilets just out of the blue as they're trying to have a romantic semi-naked moment in a bathtub on their first night. Whereas there was a long ramp up. There was a lot of transitions. And that was just one part of a much larger conversation, which, I mean, she still said those things, right?
I think it's my most cringiest moment for me to have had a conversation about unclogging a toilet. But I hope that anybody, whoever has a situation like that, will learn from that whenever they go to their auntie's house and they have a situation that they can, remember what I said about the scrubber cleaner thing.
Yeah. And apparently she calls her auntie as well, or I call mine aunties. But yeah, so I guess we can use that as a jumping off point. As Americans, or mainstream Americans, we have a very strange relationship with not only our bodies and I guess sexuality, but also bathroom stuff, if you will. I won't go into details, but because if you're of mainstream American culture, you probably don't even want to hear people talk about it, which is really kind of odd. You might even have a book for your kids that says, everybody poops, because that book, I think, is designed to try to counteract the stigma in our society around these kinds of things, and also help people, young people, kids, to accept reality and to not have complexes around normal bodily processes. So we have a very strange relationship. And when you go around the world, it depends, and there's thousands of different cultures in the world, and this particular dial on the cultural dial spectrum, I'm sure every culture has a different number, so to speak. And for us in the mainstream United States, I'd say that we're at a 9 or a 10. I always, in terms of the severity of our stigma around bathroom stuff, the one thing I always talk about is that I, as a Japanese American person, I have been around a lot of Japanese people and products. And one of the things that is highly prevalent in Japan and has been for a long time is bidets. And when I discovered bidets and electronic bidets, the Toto and the other kinds of, the heated ones, the padded ones, the spritzer ones and the air dryer ones, when I discovered them later in life, I just thought, these are the best thing of all time, and in my family, Japanese American family, there's a fair amount of liberal talk about that kind of stuff. And to the point where in my family, it wasn't necessarily true that you would close the door to the bathroom. As a kid, I'd just come around the corner and go, where's Dad? And I just walk in the bathroom. There's Dad, doing his thing. And, it's just normal life. And so, I don't know if every Japanese American family is like that. I suspect they're in that direction because my relatives are kind of like that. But anyway, so for me, when I discovered bidets, I'm just like, for you 90 Day Fiancé people, think of Jihoon, clean anal, that kind of stuff. And so I thought, why don't we in the States have these? We should all have these, some version of it. And then I started thinking more about it. It's like, what are we doing? I mean, the way we deal with it, with paper, that's bizarre. If you, say you fall down in a mud puddle, or a grease pile, you're in an auto shop, let's just say hypothetically, and you're getting your oil changed and there's a grease pile on the ground and you slip and fall and you get it on your elbow. Do you stand up and just take paper and wipe it off? No, you put that stuff under some water, maybe even some soap, right? And you really clean it off because that's what is required to clean off that kind of stuff. And so to just use paper is barbaric, I don't know, gross. And so, of course, I thought, well, it's illogical. And so when I started to yammer about this, because, I'm a yammerer, in the 90s, people would be like, gross, but, bidets, that's disgusting. And I'm like, you're disgusting for not considering that bidets would make you less disgusting. Like, bidets will make you less disgusting, you disgusting person. I don't want to judge anyone, but... do what you want with your bodies, of course. At the very least, it should be an option, right? It shouldn't be a disgusting option. It's the opposite. You're more clean. You're more more thorough. You're more conscientious about that end of your body. And so for decades, I was bewildered that no one would eat, white people in America, they wouldn't even want me to talk about it. And they thought I was utterly ridiculous and disgusting for even bringing it up, just the idea that bidets were better. And two, I was bewildered. I couldn't find them. I couldn't buy them. You had to buy them from Japan. They were real expensive. And the other thing is, like in the United States, they don't put outlets, power outlets, receptacles by toilets, because for those fancy Japanese ones, you need a outlet. You need a receptacle to plug it in. And you can't find it. By the way, you can buy this one. Maybe I should have a deal with this company. You don't need power. It's the Kohler K57240 Pure Tide situation. 2 thumbs up. And Kohler, get at me. Sponsorship opportunity. I would heartily support. I can't wait for my wife, Stacy, to edit this. I can't wait. She doesn't edit it per se. She reviews it to make sure that there's no kind of weird anomalies. I edit everything myself, but she kind of does it once over. And so I don't know. I just can't wait until she watches this.
They have a situation that they can, remember what I said about the scrubber cleaner thing. Hopefully that will come from that conversation. Oh.
No, because a lot of people, I had actually forgotten about that until you brought it back up. But a lot of people were commenting, being like, "Why is she talking about the toilet thing?"
Now, here's the bigger psychological issue: that because who cares really about the whole? Cleanliness, it's important, but I'm guessing things are fine for people that don't use bidets. But the real issue is that we in our society, that we construct together socially, we socially construct meanings and understandings and protocols and culture together. It's both imposed on us and we participate in it. That proposes that below the belt stuff is disgusting and you're disgusting because you have those things. And that does a number on our self-esteem, on our ability to seek out information. There are many people who are indoctrinated into this way of thinking in our culture who have no idea what's going on down there because of the stigma that has been imposed upon them. They didn't emerge from the womb with that stigma. It was imposed on them, and there are a lot of consequences to that. So many things generate from that: lack of awareness, lack of education, personal shame, personal avoidance. It can lead essentially to rape culture because and victimization, because the whole topic isn't talked about, and so you're not prepared for the potential reality that someone would want to exploit you in some way, or someone could come along and exploit you because you have stigma around it or something, or you will propose abstinence only kind of education because you just think the whole thing is gross. And so, yeah, there's just so many negative consequences to ourselves, to our children, to our marriages, to our health, to our life choices, to our education system, to our self-esteem, our body image. There are so many things that stem from the overall culture of stigmatizing everything having to do with that. And the bidet versus no bidet phenomenon is a product of that and also contributes to it, is my point. Not to make it a more somber term, but I fully believe all of what I just said. I think it's an important topic. I think we need to be, there are things to be ashamed of. People say like, well, there should be people, you should never be ashamed of yourself or something. Shame is bad, guilt is okay. I don't believe that. I think that shame is good. There are things you absolutely should be ashamed of. If you purposely are harming another human being when you don't have to harm the other human, or harming the environment, or you're causing harm to animals, the environment, to other humans, if you're purposely doing that and you don't have to, you should be ashamed of yourself. If those people that roll coal, they have a car that is purposely pumping out particulates and pollutants into the air because they're trying to stick it to the libs. And they should be ashamed of themselves because they're ruining it for themselves and everyone else for no reason, because of some kind of sadistic desire to, ruin the environment like that. If you want to yell it, or you want to vote, or you want to go on Facebook and say that environmentalism is stupid or something, which is ridiculous, but that's just words, but you're going to drive around. So you should, people who murder because they, someone who walks into a 7-Eleven with a gun and is holding up the place and decides, I think I'll just kill the guy. That happens sometimes. It's rare, but it happens. That person should be deeply ashamed of themselves. So shame is important. We evolved shame for a reason, and that's its function, is to identify those individuals and the behavior within yourself that you should never ever do, and you should feel horrible for it, and you should really avoid doing that again, and you should apologize deeply for it. So it's very rare. In fact, there are potential realities in which you have never done anything legitimately shameful, even though you felt a lot of shame for things, right? So I want to be clear that there are some behaviors that deserve shame and to be shamed, but there's a possibility that you have never done any of those things. And thus, all the shame that you felt in your life was because someone made you feel that way, or culture made you feel that way. How many people are ashamed of below the belt for themselves? How many people are ashamed of their bodies? They should not be ashamed of their bodies. Their bodies are their bodies. Their bodies aren't harming anyone. Their bodies aren't murdering an innocent cashier at the 7-Eleven. Their bodies are their bodies. And we should be proud of our bodies. We should be glorified. I mean, our bodies are wonderful instruments that keep us alive and keep us moving, and all the art and all the meaning and all the things that we've ever thought and done, it's all just from our bodies, and what a wonderful thing. And so your body right now is, I'm able with my body to say all these words and to think them up, and then you're able to comprehend them through this thing that a bunch of other people with their bodies invented, all these computers and generate electricity. It's just a wonderful thing. It's a miracle. Our bodies are miracles. We should not be ashamed of them. And the parts of our bodies that are stigmatized and shamed it's a tragedy. That's my point. That's my point. So to review, plunger talk, poop talk, bidets, grease on the elbow. Can't wait for my wife to review this. Shame for some, for the rest of us, everything we're ashamed of, we're ashamed of it because society told us we're supposed to be, and that is a crime on humanity.